It is my pleasure to welcome into the program here on a Monday morning. He is the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Laramie. Todd Feezer is in studio. Good morning. How are you today?
Doing great, David. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming in. You and I talked last week, and it was a hot button topic because we'd had a few folks that had inquired via our Ask the City feature at laramie.youtube, and I still encourage you folks to take advantage of that in the listening audience. But I'd gotten a couple of emails, we had gotten a couple of phone calls, and so I decided I'm going to reach out and visit, and so I contacted. I was like, so who's the best person to contact? They said Todd Feezer. So I called you, left you a message. You got back to me. I was amazingly in the office, but the smell that is at what we lovingly call Stink Lake here in town, which I know that makes you cringe a little bit.
It does.
I appreciate you actually being honest about that, because when I first got here and somebody said, yeah, it's Stink Lake, Stink Pond, and I was like, what? Of course, this is a long time ago now, but yeah, it is here, and that smell is ever present. What is going on? Explain to folks what is actually happening that's maybe a little different this summer than maybe in the past, with why we're getting so much of that sulfur dioxide off LaBonte Lake this year.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And really what we think the big thing that's causing the issue is the lake's incredibly shallow. It's maybe 4 feet deep at the deepest in the middle, which doesn't make for a healthy pond by any means. But we've had a long string of warm weather, long days, a lot of days over 80, very few cooling days, not a lot of cool moisture coming in. Basically what's happened is the lake's gone to where it's a one temperature all the way through. And what that does is that separates the warm layer from the cool layer, and all the debris on the bottom that's been decaying or rotting over time, creating the sulfur dioxide, has suddenly been able to be released because there's no cap to it, and it comes to the surface and it creates that odor. And so that's what, if you live in the northern part of town, and we've seen several people that are that have been commenting on, oh, that's what that smell is. That's what, and it's starting to spread. It sounds like throughout town a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. We're starting to notice it farther and farther away. And I've only been in town for about 18 months now, and we didn't really notice it last year. We had kind of a nice summer, a very normal summer that was not super hot, and we had some good rainstorms, and it kept that from really coming through. Apparently we still got some odor, but we didn't get the big outburst of odor that we got this year, and so we are starting to see it go a little farther.
Well, and it's one of those situations where I think people realize it's not the healthiest lake in town to begin with. There have been some issues. Some people brought up the old fountain. That got replaced, it seems like a while back now. Do you know how long this solar B unit that is presently there has been in place?
I can't tell you. I don't know how long it's been there. I know that we just recently had it serviced, and the maintenance company came in that we have under contract, and it's running the way it's supposed to. It's moving the water, it's doing what it's supposed to. But the big problem on those aeration units is the cost in electricity to run all that air bubblers out there. So there's, you make the best choices you can with the budget over time, and I actually implemented a solar bee in my previous career and had good success with it, but we also had about a 12-foot deep lake, so it was a little bit different. So, but we're working on some new things. We did some research, and we're actually looking to start utilizing some beneficial bacteria beginning tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, all right, so that's something that you hadn't quite made a decision on exactly what the treatment steps were, but when I reached out to you, we were trying to explain to everybody exactly what was going on, so it was a pretty warm June. It's been a pretty warm July, and so with it being shallow, because what that B unit does is it's supposed to take cooler water at the bottom, very shallow bottom, and bring it to the surface so it doesn't emit the odor as much.
Correct. Actually, the solar bee is just meant to cycle the water in the lake to help prevent algae bloom and keep the lake healthy. And just unfortunately, with this warm string of weather in the shallow lake, it's really very difficult for it to keep up or to do what it's supposed to do, especially when the lake's all one temperature now.
Yeah.
So we're really going to look hard at some future funding to hopefully get the lake dredged out, maybe make it a little deeper. In some history and some research that I've been doing is, that was an old landfill, and that may prevent me from being able to dig deep in the lake. Who knows what's down there, and do we really want to get into that? So
right.
I think this beneficial bacteria, from the research we've done, there's two kinds. One that helps eat the muck that's decomposing on the bottom, doesn't take a lot of oxygen, and then one that eats the suspended solids that we're starting to smell now. So we're going to try the suspended solids. We're going to do multiple treatments, see if that helps, and then we'll try to start addressing it by digesting the bottom of it.
So how did you come to this decision on these treatments versus other options?
Well, right now it has to do with the financial end of it. You know, these treatments total are going to cost the city about $5,000 across a year, which is something that I think that we could probably do. You know, when it comes to dredging a lake or trying to make it deeper, relining, we're talking hundreds of thousands, maybe even close to $1 million to get the lake to a healthy level.
Wow. Well, a lot of people have brought up the idea of, well, Mr. Feezer, why don't we use a GoFundMe campaign? What is your response to that? Because that has been brought up a few different times on our Facebook page and some people, readers' comments, I guess.
You know, I love all the ideas that we're getting, you know, and I don't diminish the fact that people would love to contribute to it, but you know, I just need a little bit of time to get my feet on the ground, and I know I can be successful here and get some improvements. And so, you know, like you mentioned, the fact that folks have called it Stink Lake for 50 years or more,
yeah, it's been a while,
a long time. It still makes me cringe just a little bit that I don't want the Parks Department to have anything that's got a negative connotation in it. That's one of the pieces we can address. You know, there's 205J grants through the Department of Environmental Quality that we can apply for to help us with design and engineering of what the pond should look like. There's also going to be grant opportunities and funding pieces that we can go through to try to get this pulled off, and potentially maybe even some in-house services. When the lake freezes over, potentially we can pull it out and maybe we can dredge a few pieces a few times a year with our own crews and actually get there. So we're going to look at every avenue and do everything we can to get to the solution.
Absolutely. People have asked, are there fish there? I know the answer to that is no. Some people are asking, could fish live there that can deal with the sulfur dioxide that could help eat the algae? You know,
one of the interesting things on the Game and Fish Department's got some pretty specific rules on what type of fish can be implemented. And that lake right now in a high water event overflows to the Laramie River. So anything that's put into that lake has to be native to the Laramie Basin. And you know, some of the fish that are being suggested, some black bullheads or grass carp or whichever, you know, they're not native to the Laramie region. I would hate to be the one that implemented those and then had them get infiltrated into the Laramie River Basin. It's so there's a lot of rules, but we're certainly not going to put any of that aside. But you know, that the health of the lake is going to be a priority for us over the next few years.
People have brought up, you know, in conversation on this since I did this story back on what would have been last Thursday, the 20th. People have been talking a little bit about you know, just you know, remedies and different things, and you know, some people realized it was a landfill. Others had maybe forgotten that over time, or maybe hadn't been around here long enough that it had been a landfill. Do you feel like that does contribute to part of what's going on with this lake?
You know, I would hope not, because it's got a cap. It's got a layer that's protecting the water between that and the landfill. But, you know, I think over the years, maybe some decisions have been made. You know, we've had an infiltration of cattails. If I look back at the historic pictures, you don't see the cattails in the lake. And what that's done is that's implemented more organic material into the basins, caused us more issue for the rot, you know. So I think we've got to get back to what the lake originally was, try to clean it up as best we can, and, you know, potentially continue to look at some different avenues. You know, I mentioned the electrical cost on the aerators, but they do have some wind-powered aerators that could work for us. We get plenty of wind in this part of the country, you know, so potentially that. But, you know, it all takes time, and, you know, I'm really happy to be in Laramie. It's a big job. It's been probably more than I'd anticipated. I enjoy the what do I want to say, the challenge. But it's, you know, every time it takes me a little while to get things straightened out, and we'll get there.
Yeah, some people are suggesting that, you know, you put some paddle boats on it for the summer and maybe troll the rot that way. I don't know how many people would actually voluntarily go out on that lake, even how small it is.
Or if you're out there with your young kids and one of them decides to jump off, what you got to deal with after they're in that water.
Yeah,
that's probably not.
Probably not the best way you want to go about that. It is not something, you know, this first kind of brought up because people were noticing, and I got a couple of inquiries here about the lack of fowl, waterfowl in the area. Because, I mean, usually you'll see different species of bird there, and you haven't really for a while, because it seems like they've been even kind of turned off by the sulfur dioxide.
You know, and that's going to come from a food source, and if there's no fish or no small fish, you're not going to be able to get that fowl to come in. You know, last year I did notice, and I have a few pictures that I took of the cranes that came through, and I expect that they'll come through again, because they're not necessarily, they're just using it as a stop point, some cool water, and then heading on. But You know, we've got, if we get the lake a little healthier, we'll bring back, I know there's still some salamanders hanging around there.
Right.
You know, I can't say that we'll ever have fish, but we certainly, lakes deteriorate, and if you can't get on top of it, start controlling it, they continue to deteriorate. And now I'm at the point where it's gone long enough, it needs to be corrected, and that's what we're going to try to do. Once we get it healthy, you'll see it come back.
Yes, a lot of people have been asking, you know, how come the city doesn't make this a priority, but it sounds like you are making this almost priority number one. This is really the only lake that the city has within the city limits.
We've got Huck Finn Pond.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You know, it's heavily fed with spring water. From what I understand, LaBonte Lake's also fed with some spring water, but it's a slow trickle spring. And our infiltration at LaBonte is mostly storm water, which brings with it its own issues. We've got sediment and nutrients from when people fertilize or do whichever, and it runs into stormwater. We catch those. But you know, it's a large park system. There's a lot to address in different parts and pieces. You know, the park system continues to grow, and as the community develops, you know, each neighborhood ends up with walking trails or a park system or a small park or different pieces. And it's a matter of giving me a little bit of time to figure out the right place to put the funding. You know, the beneficial bacteria is about a $5,000 a year investment, but I think it's worth a try for a year, because if it works, then I think we're pretty good for a few years until we can get the money to deepen the lake or figure out how to really improve it. But you know, we're going to continue to address the different parts and pieces, and we're going to think outside the box now at the Parks and Recreation Department.
Kind of straying away from LaBonte for just a moment, what are some of the other priorities that you have right now with the Parks and Recreation Department, and what you guys are kind of focusing on from the City of Laramie standpoint?
We're really working hard. One of the things we're doing is we're really trying to get the culture to be a can-do culture. You know, the Parks and Recreation Department, we're quality of life, and we can do a lot, and we can help. You know, we've done some things to help address. We've helped downtown with the parking lot at First Street and getting it striped and getting it lined out. That was a big feather in our cap, but really a funding model that provides the right amount of money to provide manpower and the supplies. You know, a lot of times you get heavy in the budget where you have too much manpower and no supplies, or you have money for supplies but no manpower. So we've really got to find that balance and get it lined out and make that used correctly. And you know, the city manager and I have been talking about lots of different ideas and how we're going to address this and how we're going to continue to keep up with the UDC that brings on new parkland at different times. So, you know, really just trying to figure out a sustainable funding model to continue to give the residents of Laramie the excellent park system that they're used to. Well,
and that's a challenge nowadays because of the budget crunch that we're, frankly, everybody across the state's facing, from the state level to the county level down to the city level.
Absolutely, and you see it, you know, and here in Laramie we're even, you know, we've got the nervousness over what's going on at the university, and then the state also thinks that there might be cuts, and you know, it all comes together. It's really hard to figure out your way through, and you know, we work hard on cost recovery too, you know, trying to make sure that quality of life, fortunately or unfortunately, folks will pay for services, and so we've got to learn to make sure that our revenue and our cost of our programs helps cover the cost of what it takes to do it and make less impact on the general fund budget.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure meeting you.